Hello guys and girls, and welcome to today's video. As you can see here on the screen, our topic today is the counter-argument paragraph. Now, the good news is that I am not making you write a counter-argument paragraph today, but the unfortunate, or maybe not so unfortunate news is that I am going to take a grade on this Ed puzzle today. So there are going to be some questions built in along the way. You're definitely going to want to make sure you are paying close attention so that you are prepared and can answer those questions correctly. Now, the reason that we are talking about counter arguments today is because the last several Fridays we have spent some time reviewing the different parts of the on-demand essay, considering we are taking our KSA test next week. This is going to be a really good review to help you and make sure that you are prepared for when that time comes. So again, I am taking a grade over this today, so make sure you're paying attention. Let's talk about first what a counter argument is. So when we are writing an on-demand essay, we know that our on-demands in total are 5 paragraphs. The introduction paragraph comes first, and then you have 2 body paragraphs. And after those 2 body paragraphs, you have your counter-argument paragraph. Like it says here on the screen, when you counter-argue, you consider a possible argument against your thesis, and then you prove it wrong. So it's like you have to pretend that someone is arguing with you about whatever the topic is, and you have to take one of their points, so someone who disagrees with you, something that they would say, and then you have to prove them wrong. If our counter argument were a shape, this is what it would look like. We've got a rectangle going on. The counter argument always starts with the opposing argument, so you begin by introducing the other side, but then you have to give a counter argument, so that is where you prove the other side wrong. The rest of the paragraph follows exactly what we know about body paragraphs. You have an E1 and an E2, so some evidence that you're going to explain. Then you're going to have an internal transition and another E1 and E2, and then you're going to end with your concluding sentence, just like we do with all of our other body paragraphs. The only difference between your body paragraphs and your counter-argument paragraph is that body paragraphs start with a topic sentence that you get from your thesis statement, and the counter-argument paragraph starts with the opposing argument. Here are some great ways to begin your counter-argument paragraph. If I were you, I would make sure that I have one of these memorized so that when you are doing your on-demand essay on KSA next week, you can just pull one of these right out of your hat. So here are some options. While some may say blank, this is not the case because blank. And I'll just add here that anywhere where you see these ... dots, that's where you would add some information. So while some may say, this is where you would put the opposing argument. This is not the case because, and that is your counter argument. Another example is, while it is true that, this argument is weak because. Some may argue that, however. There is some truth to blank, however blank. Or while some people may believe blank, this is not good because blank. After you introduce the opposing argument, you have to provide counter arguments and counter evidence. So again, the whole purpose of a counter argument paragraph is to take the opposite side and prove it wrong. One mistake that I see people make from time to time, because technically you are starting the paragraph with the opposing viewpoint, some people will give me evidence that supports the opposing side. You do not want to do that. Your E1s and your E2s in your counter argument need to support your side of the argument. Remember, in a counter argument, all you are doing is introducing the opposing side, but then you are proving it wrong with evidence from the passage. We've already talked about this a little bit, but just remember that the counter-argument paragraph is the fourth paragraph of the essay. It's technically like your third body paragraph. So you have your introduction paragraph first, you have your 2 body paragraphs, and then you have your counter-argument followed by your conclusion paragraph. Here's an example of a counter-argument paragraph, and we're going to go through and see if we can identify the different parts here. I'm going to read it and I'd like you to follow along with me. It says, some argue that they would like to visit the Titanic so that they can see and experience an important part of history. However, what they fail to realize is how dangerous this experience would actually be. The text says, the deep sea is an unforgiving place. Outside the protection of a submersible, the deep ocean is pitch black and nearly freezing. There are so many things that could go wrong while visiting the wreckage of the Titanic because we know very little about what actually lives in the deep ocean. In fact, at this point in history, only about 5% of it has even been explored. It's important to remember that the submersible could be damaged by the water pressure at this depth, not to mention the sea life living there. Furthermore, the text says, oceans cover more than 2/3 of our planet, yet we know more about the surface of Mars than we know about the ocean floor. Can you imagine all of the dangers that may be lurking near the Titanic wreckage? There could very well be sea creatures that have yet to be discovered that may pose a serious risk to travelers visiting the bottom of the ocean. Is visiting the Titanic really worth risking your life? If we were to break this down, remember counter-argument paragraphs always start with the opposing viewpoint, so the opposite side. We started this one by stating, some argue that they would like to visit the Titanic so that they can see and experience an important part of history. That is the opposite viewpoint. Now we get into the counter-argument, and this is where we explain that even though maybe these people would like to experience an important part of history, that is not a valid reason to visit the Titanic wreckage, and we tell why. What they fail to realize is how dangerous this experience would be. Since I stated in my opposing argument that it's very dangerous, or pardon, in my counter argument that it's very dangerous, then all of the evidence that I provide from this point on should focus on the dangers of visiting the Titanic wreckage. After our opposing argument and counter argument, the rest of the paragraph is just like our other body paragraphs. So I'm starting with some evidence. Notice I have a good sentence starter, the text says, and then I have quotation marks. The deep sea is an unforgiving place. Outside the protection of a submersible, the deep ocean is pitch black and nearly freezing. And now for my E2, I'm going to explain why that is dangerous. And this is in my own words because my explanation is not copied from the text. It is from my own brain. There are so many things that could go wrong while visiting the wreckage of the Titanic because we know very little about what actually lives in the deep ocean. In fact, at this point in history, only about 5% of it has even been explored. It's important to remember that the submersible could be damaged by the water pressure at this depth, not to mention the sea life living there. Remember that your E2 should be at least 2 sentences. For this E2, I wrote 3 sentences, and that is okay, but we need to have at least 2. After my first E1 and E2, I'm going to give an internal transition. I used furthermore, and then I have another E1. The text says, oceans cover more than 2/3 of our planet, yet we know more about the surface of Mars than we know about the ocean floor. Again, I'm going to give my E2, and this is going to explain in my own words how this evidence shows that visiting the Titanic wreckage would be dangerous. So I stated, can you imagine all of the dangers that may be lurking near the Titanic wreckage? There could very well be sea creatures that have yet to be discovered that may pose a serious risk to travelers visiting the bottom of the ocean. Again, 2 sentences in my own words explaining why it's dangerous. Then I'm going to end my counter-argument paragraph just like we end our body paragraphs, and that is with a concluding sentence. And I stated, is visiting the Titanic really worth risking your life? Hopefully this was a good review for you guys. I know we went through it super quickly. We have written so many paragraphs this year, so I know you guys are absolutely going to rock it when you take your KSA test next week. Good luck.